the headlines, President Park Geun-hye vows to realize an education system that breaks away from traditional models to stress creativity. Hyundai Motor Group agrees to pay $100 million for exaggerating fuel economy for more than 1 million cars sold in the U.S., the largest civil penalty ever under the Clean Air Act. And voting for the U.S. midterm elections is seen as a referendum for the Obama administration begins Tuesday. Welcome to the program, everyone. You're watching Primetime News and coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Well, though Korea's education system has long been hailed as the foundation of the nation's quick rise from post-Korean War poverty, reformers have been calling for changes to better equip students for the 21st century.
And at a special forum on education in Seoul, President Park Geun-hye talked about focusing on creativity and innovation to bring Korean and global education systems up a notch. Choi Yoo-sun has more.
President Park Geun-hye at a symposium co-organized by Seoul and the World Bank on Tuesday said the time has come for the Korean education system to transform in the face of new challenges in the 21st century. The president referred to her talks with World Bank President Kim Yong-kim last year when they agreed that innovation and creativity are the foundation of sustainable growth and that it's education that can foster such talents at the center of a creative economy.
저는 우리 교육이 혁신을 이루어낼 창의적인 아이디어와 도전 정신을 키워내는 원천이 되어야 한다고 생각합니다. 개개인의 잠재된 능력을 최대한 끌어올려서 아이디어와 열정으로 가득한 융합 인재를 길러내는 창의 인재 양성 교육으로 변해야 합니다.
Korea recently participated in the UN Global Education First Initiative and joined the Global Partnership for Education in its bid to play a more active role in international efforts to enhance the quality of education in the developing world.
그동안 축적해온 교육의 노하우에 선진국의 우수 사례를 접목하고 이제까지의 교육 패러다임을 뛰어넘는 행복 교육, 창의 교육을 실현해서 우리 교육의 발전은 물론 세계 교육의 발전에도 기여해 나가기를 기대하고 있습니다.
The World Bank president also at the event said Korea's GDP could annually expand 0.6% for 20 years if the country narrows the gap between male and female workforce participation. He then called on Koreans to break down the social and economic hierarchies that often prevent women and youth from unleashing their potential. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Deregulation is a key part of the Park Geun-hye administration's plan to boost the domestic economy. And as part of such efforts, the Korean government is easing restrictions within its free economic zones to make them more attractive for investment. Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
The Korean government is easing regulations on its 8 free economic zones to increase the number of developers and thereby make it less of a pain for businesses to invest there. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy says it will lower the minimum requirement of developmental areas from the previous 330 to 200 square meters. The move will also give investors a higher rate of return, as the minimum reinvestment rate is being lowered from 25% to 10% of the profits generated from operating within the zones. Given the benefits, the move is expected to boost the number of private investors, as landowners and their associations will now be able to participate as developers of the zones. The ministry says it plans to raise $20 billion worth of economic benefit from the zones over the next 10 years.
The easing of restrictions is a move toward inducing more investment and development in the free economic zones, particularly in those that are still undeveloped.
There are currently 88 districts within the 8 free economic zones in Korea. A zone in Chungbuk and the East Coast Free Economic Zone were added to the list last year as part of efforts to revive the local economy. But despite a number of measures introduced over the years, more than 40% of the districts are currently undeveloped due to low participation. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Korea's flagship automakers Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors have been hit with a massive fine by the U.S. government for misleading customers about the fuel economy of many of their cars. The settlement involves a payment of $100 million and a forfeiture of $200 million worth of carbon credits. Our Shin Se-min explains.
Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors have been hit with a record fine of a combined $350 million in United States for overstating fuel economy standards on more than 1 million automobiles. That was the settlement reached on Monday between the Korean Auto Group and U.S. authorities. The fine itself amounts to $100 million. Under the terms, Hyundai and Kia will also forfeit greenhouse gas emission credits worth over $200 million and spend another $50 million on measures to prevent violations in the future. The penalty is the largest ever issued under the Clean Air Act. David Zachowski, the president and chief executive officer of Hyundai Motor America, said in a statement that his company had acted transparently, reimbursed affected customers, and fully cooperated with the investigation, and that the company was pleased to put the issue behind them. This week's settlement comes 2 years after Hyundai and Kia conceded that they had overstated fuel efficiency standards by between 1 to 6 miles per gallon for a 2-year period on automobiles sold in the U.S. They agreed at the time to compensate drivers of the affected automobiles by issuing debit cards. That admission came after the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency investigated more than a dozen Hyundai and Kia models for fuel efficiency discrepancies in response to consumer complaints. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And in more bad news for Hyundai, the company's market share in the U.S. dropped to 3.9% last month. This is the first time in 4 years that Hyundai's U.S. market share fell below the 4% mark. Hyundai Motor says it sold around 50,000 new vehicles last month, down 6.5% from the same period last year. The automaker blamed the weak yen, which gave its Japanese rivals price competitiveness. And speaking of which, the won-to-yen exchange rate has plummeted to a 6-year low following the Bank of Japan's recent decision to expand its quantitative easing and stimulus measures, and it's hitting Korean exporters especially hard. Our Park Ji-won tells us more.
The Bank of Japan's announcement of expanded monetary stimulus measures last Friday, worth trillions of yen, sent the stock prices of Korea's largest automakers, Hyundai and Kia Motors, slipping by more than 5% on Monday. Additional drops were recorded Tuesday, stripping Hyundai of its staunch second-place position in terms of market capitalization in Korea. Analysts say the fall is largely due to negative expectations that the Korean auto giant will not be able to keep up profitability and stay competitive against its Japanese counterparts.
Taking advantage of enhanced profits due to the weakening yen, Honda and Toyota have been focusing on technological improvements to their vehicles, like boosting fuel efficiency. Korea should keep in mind that the weakening yen will make them more competitive in terms of price and quality of products.
The effects of the weakening yen is not only hitting Korea's big conglomerates, but also sending strong shockwaves to smaller companies. 3 years ago, the yen was trading at more than 1,500 won per 100 yen, but now stands at around 950 won per 100 yen, meaning a 40% decrease in export revenues. According to the Korea Federation of SMEs, the break-even point for small and medium-sized exporter is 1,014 won per 100 yen. The current 1 yen exchange rate falls way below that.
If the exchange rate falls to around 951 per 100 yen, Korea's export volume will decrease 4.2% and down to 8.8% if the rate falls to 900.
Around half of Korea's top 100 exports fiercely compete with Japanese products, but as the yen weakened with no immediate end in sight, bleak forecasts are weighing heavy on Korea's main exporters. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News.
Now, over at another international event in Korea's port city of Busan, the International Telecommunication Union's event, which comes to a close in just 3 days from now, has adopted an agenda to promote the Internet of Things. Song Ji-sun reports.
The International Telecommunications Union, for the first time, adopted an agenda regarding the Internet of Things, which was proposed by this year's host, South Korea. IoT refers to the connection of devices and objects through the Internet, and Seoul had proposed that it be facilitated to prepare for the future. Less than 1% of these objects are currently connected to the Internet, but that number is expected to jump 10 times on the back of cloud computing and big data technologies, with the market size expanding by 5 times its current level to over $8 trillion by the year 2020. While the IoT stands to open new business opportunities for startups, supporting developing countries in their pursuit of the IoT remains a challenge for the ITU, as the resources in those nations are limited. According to the IoT index filed by the International Data Corporation last year, South Korea is the second most prepared country among G20 members after the United States, and with the latest adoption of its agenda, Seoul aims to expand its presence in setting global standards and supporting developing nations in IoT-related projects of ITU. Seoul's ICT Ministry has also designated IoT Week Korea 2014 for Wednesday to next Friday, where solutions and products related to IoT will be presented at multiple events at COEX and other locations around the capital and Busan. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's consumer prices rebounded for the first time in 4 months in October, but the inflation rate remained in the 1% range, where it's been for the past 2 years. Statistics Korea says prices grew 1.2% last month from the previous year. That falls well below the Bank of Korea's inflation target band of 2.5% to 3.5%. The agency attributes the slow growth to the falling prices of farming goods and crude oil. Korea's low birth rate and its aging society are putting pressure on the country's national budget. These factors could make a tax rate hike a necessity. According to a report by the National Assembly Budget Office, the national budget will, the national debt that is, will amount to $13.5 trillion by the year 2060 if there are no additional tax increases. That's nearly 1.7% larger than the country's expected GDP in the year 2060, meaning the average Korean citizen would be about $300,000 in actual debt. The report adds the government may not be able to repay its debt through state bonds starting from the year 2033.
Korea is the 25th best country to live in, according to a British think tank, which noted Korea's economy and education. But it also said the country would be well served to learn from countries like Norway and Switzerland in other areas. Our Kwon So-hwa has this story.
South Korea is the 25th most prosperous country out of 142 countries around the world, according to a Prosperity Index report released by the British-based Legatum Institute. This year's ranking is a notch higher than last year. Korea's best ranking was 24th in 2011. Norway topped the list for the 6th consecutive year. It was followed by Switzerland and New Zealand. The 3 most prosperous Asian countries are Singapore, Japan, and Hong Kong. The report says South Korea is the 5th best Asian country to live in. African nations filled out the majority of the bottom spots, with the Central African Republic propping up the rest. While GDP is usually the most common way to assess a country's prosperity level, the Legatum report says its definition of prosperity is more than, quote, just the accumulation of material wealth. That's why the institute measures countries by 8 categories. Korea performs strongly in economy and education, ranking 9th and 15th respectively. but the personal freedom and social capital divisions are weak.
Korea remains stuck in the mid-20 level because of its overall welfare situation. In terms of day-to-day welfare, Korea is still an awfully long way behind countries like Norway and Switzerland. If we do not make changes there, Korea seen from the outside may be a country seen as a nice place to visit, but not one of the best to live in.
But analysts are optimistic that the government's latest efforts to improve its welfare policies could boost Korea's position on the Prosperity Index list in the coming years. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Well, despite the previous reports finding that Korea is the 5th best Asian country to live in, unfortunately, some children living here in Korea may beg to differ. A nationwide survey of about 4,000 households with children under the age of 18 found that Korean children and teenagers were the least satisfied with their lives among OECD member states. Korea scored just over 60 points on a scale of 100. The Netherlands came in first at 94.2 points, followed by Iceland and Finland. Korea's welfare ministry says the dissatisfaction stems from pressure to do well in school, bullying, violence, and internet addiction.
Voting for the U.S. midterm elections is underway across America on this Tuesday as Democrats are bracing for heavy losses in both houses of Congress.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, this is being seen as one of the most pivotal midterm elections in years, and we're seeing the main rival political parties pulling out all the stops.
Well, it's estimated that $4 billion have been spent on the midterm campaigns, making it the most expensive in American history. The results are expected to have far-reaching effects on the government, as well as pave the way for the 2016 race for the White House. The latest polls are favoring Republicans as President Barack Obama's numbers continue to fall. Our Connie Lee reports.
Voters in the U.S. are heading to the polls on this Tuesday. A power shift in Congress could be underway, as the midterm elections are being seen as a referendum on President Barack Obama.
These midterm elections are an up or down vote on President Obama in terms of his stewardship of the economy, what's going on in foreign policy, and also his overall popularity.
Many races are tight or too close to call, but recent polls have been forecasting Republican gains, with many showing them taking charge of both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Voters will be electing candidates for all 435 seats in the House and 36 seats in the Senate. If Republicans hold on to their current seats and add 6 more in the House, they will hold a majority and make it a tough final 2 years for the Obama administration. On the issue of the economy, a Pew Research Center poll shows more voters believe the Republicans would do a better job than President Obama.
I don't think he's done a good job for what he said, and I don't think he was ever going to do a good job.
But there are others who think the president has a decent record.
I love him. He's doing all right. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
President Obama, supporting Democratic candidates at a rally in Illinois, reminded voters of his administration's achievements.
Over the past 4.5 years, our businesses have created more than 10 million new jobs. Housing market that was reeling is now rebounding. Auto industry that was wheezing is now roaring back.
The Ebola crisis and America's involvement in the fight against Islamic State are also factors likely to affect this year's midterms. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And staying with President Obama, the U.S. leader hosted Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen at the Oval Office on Monday. The White House said the two leaders discussed the near and long-term outlooks for the global economy, as well as that of the U.S. Financial market reforms were at the top of the agenda as U.S. regulators are working on the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act. That's legislation aimed at strengthening the nation's financial system following the 2007 credit crisis. The closed-door meeting was the first time the two met one-on-one since Yellen assumed her post as the head of the American Central Bank this past February. And finally, the president of the World Bank has put Asia's leading countries on notice, saying they are failing to do their part in combating the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. Speaking in Seoul on Tuesday, World Bank Chief Jim Yong Kim said that many Asian countries are not contributing enough, despite having a wealth of trained medical personnel to stop the spread of the deadly virus. He appealed to countries to quit using stopgap measures and to halt the Ebola epidemic at its source.
Focusing only on border control is not the right response. The world needs to put the fire out at its source, because if it doesn't, Ebola could spread to any country, including those here in Asia.
China has donated $123 million to the cause. However, the overall response from Asia is still lagging behind compared to Western states. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Che with a look at Tuesday's sports. First up, baseball. The KBO season has come down to the Korean series. Next in Heroes and the Samsung Lions met for Game 1 of a best-of-7 series. Over in Daegu, the visiting Heroes had Andy Van Hecken on the mound. The Lions put in Rick Vandenherk. Now we go to the third inning. Nexon's Vinny Rotino drives in the first run of the series. Then Kang Jung-ho hits him home, all for 2 scores. But we go to the bottom of the frame. Samsung's Yamaiko Navarro slams the 2-run homer to tie it up 2-2. And we fast forward to the 8th inning. Kang Jung-ho drives the ball over the wall for 2 runs to put Nexon back in front. And as expected, it's essentially a battle of the bullpens, and Nexon's is better this time. And Game 1 goes to the Heroes as they beat the Lions 4-2. More live games on the night. First to the KBL. The KCC Aegis hosted the ET Land Elephants in Jeonju. Now the Elephants get the early lead, but that's about it. The Aegis's 2 big men, Ha Seung-jin and Tyler Wilkerson, protect the basket, holding ET Land to 33% shooting. They lead KCC to the big win, 70-61. Now over to pro volleyball in the V-League, starting with the ladies. The Hyundai ENC Hill State faced the IBK Altos. Now Hyundai seizes the first 2 sets as Polina Rahimova explodes on the attack. And despite dropping the third set, they closed it out to win at home 3-1. Also in Suwon, the KEPCO Big Storm took on the Hyundai Capital Skywalkers, and KEPCO's attack exploited all the holes by the defense as they sweep the visitors in straight sets. And moving on, the top tennis players of 2014 are ready to go head-to-head in the season-ending ATP World Tour Finals this weekend. Split into groups A and B, they'll play a round-robin format with 2 emerging from each group to play for the title and almost $1.5 million. Now, it begins its week-long run in London on Sunday with Andy Murray and Kei Nishikori in the first match. And speaking of Nishikori, the Japanese star rose 2 spots to a record 5th in the world, the best for an Asian, extending his historic rise up in the rankings. And back to baseball, LA Dodgers ace Clayton Kershaw was honored by his peers in the MLB Players Association, winning a handful of Players' Choice Awards. Now, he swept the top honors, the MLB Player of the Year and the Marvin Miller Man of the Year, as well as the National League's Outstanding Pitcher nod. Now, despite sitting a number of games due to injury this year, he still put up career best numbers in several stats, including wins and losses and ERA. And that's all I have for now. Your weather's up next. Have a great evening.
Hello and happy Tuesday. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the weather updates. So early winter-like conditions swept the nation over the past few days, and some regions got off to a cold start this morning. But thanks to the warm autumn sun, temperatures quickly rose back to their seasonal averages by the afternoon. At the moment, we are under clear skies nationwide due to a high pressure front from the West Sea. And besides that, a dry weather watch continues to be in effect for some regions, including Seoul, and humidity levels are down to 42% in some regions. As for tomorrow, typical late autumn conditions will continue with a big gap in the readings between the day and night. Looking ahead, some good news that temperatures will continue to be on the rise for tomorrow, perfect for spending time outdoors. Otherwise, showers are forecast on the eastern coast on Thursday and Friday, and over in Jeju over the weekend. On to Wednesday's readings. Seoul reaches 18, Daegu and Gwangju 19. On to other regions. Daejeon and Dokdo hit 17, Mount Kumgang peaks at 7. That's all the updates I have for you now. I'll be back with more after midnight. See you then.
Thanks, Bo-kyung, and that's Primetime News for this Tuesday. Thanks for watching. I'm Kang Chery.
And I'm Sean Lim. We'll see you soon. Take care.